So, Ro Khanna, Oversight Committee, Armed Services Committee, Budget Committee. Only spent like 15 minutes, but went back trying to get records of you talking. You are very budget conscious. Obviously, you wouldn't be on the Budget Committee. Bernie Sanders is nowhere close to paying for any of his promises. And he is nowhere close to compromising on any of the things he wants to get done. How does that work out in politics?
Well, he has a vision of where he wants to go, but he has proposed tax increases on the rich. He's proposed tax increases on corporations. He's proposed strategic cuts on defense, and he's proposed cuts on these foreign wars that would save trillions of dollars. So
still doesn't get him close.
I think he is at. Well, it depends on what you're looking at. I mean, I think we have to look at Medicare for all. Well, if you look at Medicare for all, he's got a plan to pay for that. I mean, it's
not for all of it.
It's been proven by all.
Because he uses the Lancet study now.
He
uses the Lancet study now, the Yale study that shows they'll be spending. Now,
yes.
one, as you know, Ro, as a politician, people roll their eyes when they hear about fraud and waste being something that's going to be taken out that'll make it better, because government to most people does mean fraud and waste. But the piece of paper he gave me last night, it gets him about halfway there. How do you get the rest of the half when the numbers are in the trillions?
I don't think so. Look, even the MIT economists, Simon Johnson and others who've crunched the numbers, say you can get there by raising taxes on the rich, by having a payroll tax on employers. I mean, you don't have to take my word for it. Look at the MIT economists, look at the Harvard economists. There's a way to pay for it with a payroll tax.
There is, but there's just a lot of other spending. That, even when you take care of Medicare for all, there's another 25 or 30 trillion in spending, you're going to have to pay for. And are you worried that there's a political cost?
I don't think there's the cost of saying we're going to get out of bad wars. We're not going to have these huge military increases. Let me give you a concrete example. In the debate tonight, Bloomberg basically said, I endorse Trump's military budget increases. That's $120 billion. You know what we could do with that $120 billion? We could pay for free public college for every person in this country, school lunch, and improved Medicare, which includes hearing aids. So there are ways to pay for these things, making choices.
I have to say, Chris FREDO Cuomo is certainly a tough journalist when he decides to be, and usually that's in the face of progressives. You can actually see his interview he did with Cenk Uygur, and it's pretty similar to this one, where he tries to ask the hard-hitting questions. So I would say asking how much something costs is a valid question. The problem is when we continue this myth that the costs haven't been addressed at all. And Cuomo did say, his plan pays for half of it, or, something like that. There's a clip of Sanders from late last year, or about maybe midway through last year. I just remember it was on Morning Joe. And he had said that he would pay for single payer with the 2% tax on Wall Street speculation. And I swear, when Cuomo mentions that most people, when they hear of fraud and waste, they think government by itself is that, I very much doubt that he has a poll to support that he can actually show you some data to reflect that position, especially when single payer has polled, over 70% with Democrats. And I know it was over 52% with Republicans at one point. So it is something that people do want. I'm not saying every single person, but when you see that high of a number of support for a program, and you have these talking heads on networks telling you about what they believe the people think, that's where it gets to be ridiculous. And I hate that when Ro was trying to speak to Chris, aka FREDO, he was getting cut off. He's like, I'm using math. It's like, well, okay, if Ro concedes the validity of you stating that Sanders has not stated how much his plan is going to cost, are you then going to say, wait a second, if Sanders doesn't keep his promise and gets elected in regards to paying for this program, that's not the first time that happened. We all remember a certain current U.S. president saying during his campaign that Mexico was going to pay for his rinky-dink wall, as Michael Bennett called it. And I've yet to see that occur. But I've also yet to see FREDO make any references to to that at all. But I told you they're selective with who they choose to, bog down in details and come after for things that they've said. And really, the other issue is that I've tried to explain the idea that the U.S. is like this piggy bank that actually cares about getting out of debt. We've only ever been out of debt for 1 year in the over 200 years we've been a republic, which was under Andrew Jackson, by the way. You can look it up. I think it was 1813. My point is that it's when you're aware of that, you know that this idea that people are so concerned about the deficit and balancing the budget is completely ridiculous, especially at a time when Trump has a $1 trillion budget that you don't see any of these journalists pooping themselves over. But that's why so many people who support single payer believe there is a concentrated effort by Republicans and certain, the journalists on these mainstream networks to try and smear it, because you never see these people, other than maybe Rand Paul or Mike Lee, choose to attack something on the merit of if you can pay for it or not. So it's a sad game, and I think Roe probably handled it the best that he could. I would recommend that if he's going to, and he obviously is going to continue because he's a co-chair for Sanders' campaign, if he's going to continue his public appearances on these networks, there needs to be some kind of, because a lot of these positions are talking points. When I showed the clip of him going on Fox News and them mentioning, or rather, what was it, Dana, mentioning the high unemployment, or the low record of unemployment, and how this is not an indicator of wealth. His response was something that I wouldn't have used, because I would have immediately sought to shoot down, again, not actually using a weapon, or some people who make that connotation with my rhetoric, to tear down that statistic that they're throwing out. So when Chris mentioned that the majority of people think that government by itself is fraud and abuse, if I were Roe, I would have said, oh, is that why people are trying to get away from Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid? They're actively attempting to avoid those programs if the government is just all fraud and abuse. And I would also ask, what poll are you referring to as you make this claim? So, and I love how he tries to actually throw Roe's experience as a member of the budget committee, and be like, Sanders hasn't been giving his budget, so I don't understand how you contrast that with being part of his campaign. Well, maybe he's part of his campaign because they agree on ideological issues that go beyond. And this is another thing that I hate about a lot of perceptions of politicians. You can agree with them on 80-90% of stuff, right? But you'll have people who will try to take one thing they know about you and just blow it up to where they want it to appear as if what you're saying, like you supporting that person, doesn't make any sense. Going back to Cenk, there were people in Jimmy Dore's comment section who said, you're supporting a Russiagator in their representative run, his still ongoing representative run for the U.S. House. And it's as though these people who were just, you could tell they were so happy to see a progressive crapping on Russiagate, completely forgot that both Cenk and Dore, or Jimmy rather, are people who agree on the need for single payer, on a Green New Deal, ending the wars, all of these, the wide spectrum of issues that they chose to ignore because they separated these two people and let this one issue be the thing where it just made them seem so night and day different. So it was a nice interview, at least, as far as Roe is concerned. I hope that he doesn't have to deal with the CNN clowns anymore, but that's all part of the game of exposure.